So, and Vere's persuasive diction is very similar to his views. They are cold, hard facts with no wiggle room for morality to interfere. And so Billy is sentenced to death. And the effect of his death on the readers is actually, it makes us question whether the traditional justice that Vere pushed so hard to uphold was right, because Melville had set up a situation in which both sides of justice were being presented. We saw the morality of the other judges who were kind of questioning how to treat Billy, and then we also saw Vere's argument for traditional justice. So the death of Billy kind of caused us to think about which one was correct in his death, and as a result of his death, we never really know which one was the right one. And so, and therefore, the clear choice for moral justice in the Declaration of Independence, in the enforcement of traditional justice in Billy Budd, which led to a debatably wrongful death, both raise the question of which one is better and more beneficial to society. And for my answer, I would say neither one is necessarily better, especially in the U.S. in a justice system, because there are both moral and traditional influences on justice system that help it, that kind of create a balance. For example, in our current United States justice system, there are moral and traditional influences, with whether it's in issues like capital punishment or simply how kind of the traditional long-standing laws evolve as society evolves, that are influenced by morals. So, talking about how traditional justice is used in our justice system, the importance of custom dates back from founding philosophies to how our justice system is run today. The whole form of our justice system is based around the idea that traditional written laws must be upheld for true justice, because once laws are written down, they become more or less unalterable. For example, our U.S. Constitution is considered the highest law. No laws, rulings, or referendums can be used to counteract the Constitution. All of the rules made in those laws must abide by our Constitution. And in our Constitution, in the 3rd article, it lays out how our justice system is formed, how the Supreme Court is appointed by the President and approved by Congress, how the Supreme Court, the state courts, and the Court of Appeals all get their power, in which rulings are in the hierarchy of powers that are set up in the 3rd article are all, they all give the courts of justice the power to rule. And so all of these kind of laws and rules are written in the Constitution and are still used today, as our justice system is still in use and still intact. And the Constitution was written over 2 centuries ago. So it's just an example of how our we derive our justice system from traditional laws, because even though they were written over 200 years ago, they're still intact and still in use today. Our country would be in turmoil if we weren't still using these laws, because there would be no place from which the Supreme Court got their power. So, we would be having people rule based on their moral principles, which would then, create inequality in people's verdicts. People could be tried for the same crime and have different punishments because their judges were ruling based on their own personal moral values. So, however, that is not to completely rule out the role of morality in our justice system today. Although some may retain the idea that there is no space for morality in law, I think there is, and it is shown in how we have evolved our justice system, we have evolved our justice system based on moral opinions. For example, issues such as capital punishment are still topics today because people are still fighting about them on moral bases. The arguments for and against capital punishment are not from a traditional or long-standing viewpoint. They're all kind of how people feel what is right. They feel that people should be killed for high crimes, and personally they find that to be morally just. However, others find that to be not morally just. So huge issues like capital punishment are still being argued today on a moral basis, not necessarily a traditional basis. And furthermore, the justice system itself, although the basis of it was founded upon traditions, there have been tons of laws created to accommodate extenuating circumstances that have their basis from morality. So just as the sailors in Billy Budd were uncomfortable with the lack of accommodation for Billy's unusual situation, the modern justice system has evolved to fit certain accommodations. For example, the juvenile justice system sprouted from juvenile houses of reform as far back as 1824. So in 1824, there was no brain research done to kind of prove that young adult and children's minds are not as mature as adult minds and therefore cannot reason as well. So when people created these juvenile houses of reform, they were founding their idea that children should not be punished as harshly as adults for the same crime, simply upon their moral idea of justice. There wasn't any kind of scientific fact or other way to kind of create those laws. It was simply from their moral standpoints. And our juvenile justice system got its roots from those juvenile houses of reform, which got its roots from morality. So, just in conclusion, although there are traditional values in our justice system simply in how it's formed, there are also moral influences on how it has evolved. So therefore, the influence of traditional moral justice is still very clear today, and what arguments were formed in the Declaration of Independence and Billy Budd impact our lives and how we are treated by our government. If these different types of justice make that much of an impact on our own United States justice system, it's kind of amazing to think of all the possibilities of how it affects our lives in other ways, or how it affects other people's lives or other cultures. So the debate brought forth by the Declaration and Billy Budd are still relevant parts of our lives today, and they help us determine how to lead our lives safely and fairly, and how to maintain our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.